I think we can all agree that when it comes to books, the most important thing is what you find inside. The stories, the ideas, the language, all of that stuff, yeah, that's probably the most important thing. That being said, today we're gonna celebrate books a little differently. Today we're talking about books, the actual physical, touch them, smell them, books. And I'm gonna show you my top 10 favorite books from my shelves. These are my favorites for several different reasons. Sometimes it is about the stuff inside. Sometimes it's the story about how it came to be. Sometimes it's just a gorgeous book that's a pleasure to own. As I'm going through this list, think about your own shelves. What books give you the most joy to own, as Marie Kondo might say? And let me know in the comments what your list would be. But let's get on with my list. Now, these are my 10 favorite books that I found on my shelves, but they're not actually ordered. So yeah, it's a top 10, but you know how it goes. For number 10, because this is a channel called The Legendarium, we gotta start with some Tolkien, and I'm gonna start with this one right here, the Silmarillion. But this isn't just any Silmarillion, this is a first edition, first printing, Allen and Unwin edition. I got this at a used bookshop in Port Townsend, Washington, while I was traveling through on a vacation, and fortunately for me, the shop owner didn't really know what she had. In fact, all I could see was the tiniest little corner peeking out from under a bunch of newspapers and other books. She hadn't categorized it yet, but all I needed was that little corner to know exactly what she had. So I made her an offer, she accepted, and now I've got this book. There are a lot of these floating around at this point still, so it's not super valuable yet, but it's valuable to me, right? It's a little bit of Tolkien history, and who knows, maybe one day it will be. I especially love on this one how you can see the different colors. You can see the original color of on the front cover, and then you can see the spine was exposed for a long time, and so that part has kind of faded out. So does it make it less valuable? Yeah, probably, but I kind of like that little bit of character with this book. Next up is this copy of Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein. I got this on a different vacation in the Northwest, and this one was, I think, in Olympia, Washington. Found this one. This is Starship Troopers, which I do like. It's a really great book. It's got a lot of, well, debatable and interesting ideas if you read through it. But what I love about this is another first edition, first printing Starship Troopers. And this was printed at a time when they didn't use acid-free paper. They weren't bound especially well. So this book is, let's just say, it's not going to be read by me anytime soon. But the reason I picked this book, the reason it's such a pleasure for me to own, is because more than any other book that I own, even that copy of the Silmarillion, this one, when I hold this in my hands, I feel more like I'm holding history than with any other book that I have. All right, here's a new addition to my shelves, and it is Heroes Die by Matthew Stover. Look at this beauty. We covered this a few months ago on one of our Author's Shelf episodes. Scott Lynch chose this one for us to read, so I picked up a hardback copy and really loved the content. I can't recommend it highly enough. You should also check out that Author's Shelf episode that we did. And by the way, just a side note, I'm not really getting into the content of each of these books, right? I'm not reviewing them in this video, but we have reviewed almost all of them here on the show. So I will link to those episodes in the description below. Go check them out. But really, the reason this brings me so much joy is because I've never seen such a good book wrapped up in such a horrendous cover. I mean, this thing is majestically bad. I mean, you can pick just about any aspect of this cover and just tear it to shreds. It's terrible. And for that reason, honestly, it brings me a lot of joy. Now, if it were a really bad book with this bad a cover, it probably wouldn't bring me that much joy. But in this case, it's a great book with a terrible cover, and it makes me smile every time I see it on my shelf. Next up is this one, The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. And this one has nothing to do with the actual book. I mean, this is like a Barnes & Noble copy that I picked up at some point when we were covering it for the show. This one is all about what's inside. I was really actually kind of reluctant to try these books for a lot of reasons, some good, some bad. And it took me 2 or 3 tries to get past the very beginning with all the world building setup and that sort of thing. But once I did, once I got into it, I realized what I'd been missing. This is an absolutely astounding book. This is a work of absolute genius. And I wish I hadn't been so nervous to read it. If you have read this series, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Now that trilogy, the Broken Earth trilogy, all 3 of them won the Hugo Award. And if you ask me, the second 2 books probably didn't deserve that, although I don't know what books they were up against, so maybe they did. But this first book, you could put it up against just about anything, and I'd say, yeah, give it the freaking Hugo. All right, here's one that's not just about the physical book itself, but the actual cover of the book, and that's the Black Prism. The reason I love this one so much, the reason I get such joy out of having it on my shelf is because of the story about how this cover came to be. See, originally when it came out, the cover for the Black Prism looked like this. Eventually, when the sequels started coming out, the cover art changed and the spines changed. Well, the original Black Prism cover didn't fit with the rest of the series, and it was really annoying. It bothered me, and it obviously bothered Brent Weeks as well, because he went at his own personal expense and commissioned and printed a new cover for this. And so he sells this cover where you can get it on his website so you can wrap your own book in it. Or at least he did. I don't know if he still does. So that alone would be really fun. Just, you know, the author's trying to make the spines match, because we all have that little thing in our brains that really wants it to. But the really funny part is that, well, it kind of failed because people weren't paying close enough attention. So now if you look at the spine, this little yellow stripe should be on the top, and it's actually on the bottom of that little spine picture right there. And so after all that effort of getting a cover that matched the rest of the series, it still is just a little bit off in that way. So yeah, this one gives me a lot of joy just because I chuckle every time I see it. Yeah. Hey. Hey. Just filming right now.
Oh, did I interrupt you?
That's okay. Just edit around it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, now let's get to a little nostalgia. Here's my copy of The Sword of Shannara. Is it the best fantasy book ever written? No. Is it the best Terry Brooks book? No. But this is the first quote-unquote big kid book that I was given when I was 9 years old. My mom handed me a copy. The copy that I read when I was 9 was actually paperback, and that paperback has long since lost to the mists of time. But later on, I tracked down a first edition of the book and had Terry Brooks sign it. So with this one, yeah, we're going 3 cheers for nostalgia. All right, another one where the content is the most important. This is The Shadow Rising, book 4 of the Wheel of Time. So why this one? Well, I don't talk about the Wheel of Time as much as I talk about Tolkien and Sanderson and some other authors, but the Wheel of Time is actually really, really important to me. I love the series very, very much. But this book, book 4, is the one that finally cemented it in my mind as one of the greatest things I'd ever read. And a lot of you people who have read The Wheel of Time know exactly what I'm talking about. You get through the first 3 books and they're great, you have a lot of fun with them, but then you get to book 4, where Robert Jordan finally got to cut loose, open up his world, and really go nuts with it. And that took it from epic fantasy to about the epicest fantasy that you can possibly read. I debated between this one and The Dragon Reborn. I like the content of this one better, but I'll never forget growing up seeing the picture on the spine of The Dragon Reborn where you have Balsamon with his fiery eyes and mouth. And that really captured my imagination as a kid before I ever even read the series. So yeah, ultimately I went with this one though because of how much the content meant to me. And another one along those same lines, this one is content first. I mean, it's a library book copy. It doesn't really mean much, but what's inside? Oh, this is Ficciones by Jorge Luis Borges. I read this in college my sophomore year, and I'll tell you what, any teacher who assigns a book just prays their entire career that a story or a book would hit a student as hard as this one hit me. If you've read Borges, you probably know what I'm talking about. I'm sure it doesn't speak to everybody the same way, but it really lit up my imagination. When I read The Library of Babel, or Tlon Uqbar Orbis Tertius, or other stories, you know, The Garden of Forking Paths, there are so many good things in here that I can't recommend highly enough for someone who just wants to stretch their kind of literary weird brain. On the surface, the stories he writes are a lot of fun, but they're also quite applicable, whether on a personal basis or a societal basis. So yeah, cannot recommend this one highly enough. Next up is this guy, the leather-bound Elantris. I've got a copy of all of the leather bounds that Sanderson has done so far, but none of them mean quite as much to me as this one. Why is that? Well, because it's Elantris. Now, I'm not here to argue that this is the best book he's written, but it is one of my favorites because it was the first. I've actually been reading Sanderson since just weeks after this book was published, back in, what was it, 2006? Whenever it was, right out of the gate, I've been reading Sanderson and enjoying him for a long time. I feel like Elantris is unfairly maligned in the Sanderson community, and sometimes even by Sanderson himself. I think it's a really, really good book, and I've lost my original paperback copy that I first read, much like the old Sword of Shannara copy that I used to have. But I do have this very, very nice leatherbound that makes me very happy to see on my shelf. Oh, and before you ask, yes, I have actually read the leatherbound edition. You should read yours too if you have one. They're actually a pleasure to read. All right, we started with Tolkien, we'd better end with Tolkien. You knew it was coming. There was gonna be a copy of The Lord of the Rings, but which copy? I own, I don't know, dozens at this point. But the one that makes me happiest is this one right here. This is the very first hardcover edition of The Lord of the Rings that I ever bought. I bought it when I was 18 years old. And the reason this one means so much to me is, yes, partly for nostalgic reasons, but also because this copy has a lot of my notes that I've taken over the years, and it's also color-coded. Back when I was 18, I went through the entire book with a set of colored pencils, giving each character a different color, and color-coded all of the dialogue in this book. Now, does that sound like a pointless exercise? Yeah, I mean, in some ways it probably is, but it has helped me over the years as I've tried to locate who said what, or, quickly find something that happened. It has made it a lot more scannable. So if I know that Gimli said something and I know about where in the book it is, I can look for all of the brown Gimli stuff and find really quickly what it is that he said. So again, deeply personal, but yeah, that's why this is my favorite copy of The Lord of the Rings, even more so than any early editions I have, or any leather-bound editions, whatever. This is the one that I would save from a fire. All right, so like I said up top, I wanted you to think about what you would pull off of your shelves, what makes you the happiest to own. So hit the comments, let me know what your top 10 list would be, or top 5, whatever list you can come up with. Tell me about your favorite books in the comments. I'd love to hear about them. And if you're really adventurous, in the description below, you can join our Discord server and share pictures of your shelves or of the books that bring you the most joy. Yeah, would love to see you there on Discord. All right, thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.